So again, for those who are just joining the call, we're getting started in just a minute. Go ahead and shut off your video if you would, and if you will, keep your mic muted. Open up the chat window. If you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. If you actually want to make a comment or have a longer question, just type in, "Hey Andy, I want to ask a question," and we can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself, and we'll go from there. So with that, Andy, I will let you take over the screen, and we'll get started.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks everybody for joining today. Let me share out my screen here. So my name is Andy Snook. I am the CEO at FastPath. And FastPath, we are a security, audit, and compliance software company, and we are all cloud-based. The company started in 2004, and so we've been around. We're going to have our 16th birthday in April, so if you guys want to drive by the office, there's nobody there, but you could drive by and wave for our 16th birthday coming up. And so when we started the company, we did almost the majority of our selling remotely from day one. And so what we're going to talk a little bit about today is lessons learned about how we sell remotely, just meeting remotely, and kind of since the whole world has unfortunately been forced into this remote meeting and remote selling. So we'll go through a lot of the topics that we've learned over the last 16 years of selling remotely. And as Mike said, we'll take questions. I'll also send out my contact information. I'm happy to answer any questions, jump on calls with people if you have questions about kind of the way we do things. So just a little bit more about me. I was one of the founders at FastPath back in 2004. Our headquarters are in Des Moines, Iowa. We also have employees sprinkled throughout the United States. So this is a challenge for us, as it is every other company right now, not only just to do business, but also just keep our culture and our mental health alive as an organization. So as Mike mentioned, we did this session a couple of weeks, and man, has the world changed, or a couple of weeks ago, and man, has the world changed since a couple of weeks ago. So I'll talk a little bit more in depth in terms of how we've started using remote meetings more as a team, just to kind of support our culture, and just kind of support mental health across some of our employees who work from home by themselves. So we have about 1,200 customers in over 30 different countries. And again, up until about 2016, for the first 12 years of the company, we never left Des Moines to do a sale. So we'd go to trade shows, but all of the demos, all of the negotiations, everything else was done remotely. And we still predominantly do that. So for us, when we got the work from home order, it took us about an hour really to transition from being in the office in Des Moines to working from home. So we're kind of used to this environment. So an example of some of our customers, I also think it's interesting to frame this conversation. I mean, if you're a B2C right now, it's a challenge. We sell to businesses, and we sell to businesses of all sizes. So a lot of these customers, you probably recognize a lot of these logos. And so part of it is we typically deal with companies of all sizes, and also all industries. We're a horizontal solution, and the personas we're usually talking to are IT, the IT department, the office of the CFO, and then the audit teams at these organizations. So, that can impact depending on the team that you're talking to in an organization, that can impact your remote selling conversation. And so it's important to really understand the personas that you're talking to when you do decide to do a remote meeting. So keep that in mind, and we'll talk about that as we go through. So a lot of the challenges, unfortunately, and everybody's been learning these, is, face-to-face sales convert 40% of prospects. It's always easier to sit down with somebody to have a conversation. I think we're all unfortunately realizing that quite a bit now, but it's easier because you can read body language. 90% of all communication is nonverbal, so you can adjust your messaging based on, if somebody's leaning into the conversation, if they've fallen asleep during your demo, if they're not paying attention, what used to be called the BlackBerry prayer, that everybody just immediately, when you start talking, dives into their phone and stops listening. Well, the challenge is, when you're doing something remote right now, I don't know how many, right now I stopped looking. I have no idea how many people are on this call. I have no idea if anybody's paying attention. I don't know who's vacuuming the floor while they're listening to this. it's really difficult to see the level of engagement when you're doing something remotely and trying to gauge that when you're presenting and when you're meeting. So it's a lot better to do that. And then there's just also this level of trust when you can shake hands or fist bump or just wave from 6 feet away now with people. It's just a lot easier to build a lot of those connections. So virtual sales, unfortunately, only convert about 16% of prospects. In 2019, our close rate was about 46%. So we were even, fighting above our weight, even with face-to-face sales. But it's really a testament to our team and our tools and our methods that allow us to really kind of sharpen that skill set and really understand how to really kind of work those remote sales meetings. So those are really the challenges right now. I mean, obviously, those were challenges that existed. I do this presentation for the Global Insurance Accelerator in Des Moines each time they have a new cohort come in, and it's a challenge before, and it's even a bigger challenge now. But being able to use some of these tips and tricks will hopefully make you more productive as you go. And again, this deck is really about remote sales, but this can also help you as you do some of the hygiene that we talk about. This can help you in internal meetings as well. So we'll talk a little bit about a sales process. We'll talk about working with prospects. We'll talk about doing a demo. So again, I live in the software industry. So again, and even if you don't work in software right now, you're going to have to be able to demonstrate the value of your product, whatever it is, or your service to a prospect. So we'll talk about demos and how to do that. And then we'll talk about some of the tools that you can use as you go through some of these meetings. So the first thing is be prepared, right? So understand what your sales process is. And a lot of times when I do this in person, or if I can take raise a hands, I'll say how many people have a formalized sales process, and it's usually 50 to 60% of the people. And honestly, everybody has a sales process. Some people just haven't formalized it or documented it. And if you haven't formalized or documented your sales process, I would take this time right now to maybe start thinking about that, because you can really improve everything that you do if you better understand what you're trying to sell at each step of your sales process, right? Because for us, as a company, we're not trying to close the deal and sell software during every single meeting that we have, right? That's not realistic. So in certain industries, that is realistic. You hope to have the call, the demo, the sale, all in one 60-minute session. And so like for our different sales teams, right? So for our business development reps, those are the great people on our team that do the cold calling and the reach outs and those things. Are they really trying to sell software on those calls? Are they trying to drive interest, or are they trying to sell a demo? Like we coach them to say, and they're incentivized to sell a demo on that call. So the first thing you need to know is when you go into a meeting, whether it's remote or when we get back to real life or our new normal here, what are you trying to do at each step of the process? What's the goal? What's the headline of the meeting coming out of that process? And then the other part of that is what's the goal of the meeting? And then part of that goal is always what do you need to get to the next step in the business process? And that really should be the goal of the next step. For us, we need to know what system do they use that needs to be audited? Who's going to be in the next call? What are their major pain points, et cetera? And you can start to build a list of those things, and it's going to make you more efficient both as in your meetings, but also in your sales process. But then that also helps your prospect better understand the sales process, and you can guide them through that purchasing process for them as well. So again, I'll, as part of this deck, and Mike will share the deck with you. It has a sample sales process in it. And I know Mike and I have talked a little bit about potentially, doing another session, a follow-up session to this, talking about how to build a sales process and how to think about that. So again, if you haven't formalized a sales process, I would strongly encourage you to do that. And then the second thing is understand your audience, right? What is their business challenge? And like I talked about, we have 3 different personas that we're typically selling to: finance, audit, and IT. Well, finance and IT, they might have very different challenges they might have very different skill sets in terms of understanding the challenge, right? So what our software does is it takes something that's extremely technical in software and it makes it easy for auditors and accountants to understand that. You don't have to be a developer or a programmer to be able to understand our tool. That's really what a lot of the value that we bring to our customers. And so, but that challenge is different along the way. So one is identify the challenge that your audience is going to have, and then the next thing to do is understand who the audience is on that next sales call. Is it going to be a blended audience with different personas? Is it going to be one specific audience? What challenge do they want you to solve? And that's what we do. Our kind of methodology for sales is we do solution selling. Like I tell our sales team all the time, people don't give a rip about what our software is called. They don't give a rip about what our software does. They care about solving their problem, right? They don't, I don't care what it right now, if there was a cure, I don't care what the cure to COVID would be or what they're going to call it or anything else. I just want to know that it's going to let me go coach Little League baseball again this summer, right? That's all I want to know. So what's their problem and how do you solve their problem? That's our sales methodology, right? And each company and each team that's on here might have a different sales methodology. But what we're trying to understand is identify what's the challenge and who has that challenge, and then identify who's going to be on that next call, right? And then also, if you can understand who are the decision makers in the sales process, who are the deal breakers in the sales process, start to understand who are the key people that you need to talk to throughout, right? If for us, we have to talk to the CFO. We never sell a deal without talking to the CFO or getting them on board, or the VP of IT or whoever it may be. You want to make sure that you know that, so that when you get into the meetings, are the right people in the virtual meeting, right? In your remote meeting, are they in the room? Are they hearing the message? And if they couldn't be in the room, how is that going to get communicated to them down the line? And then the last thing is, one of the bigger things is what is the company, your prospect's purchasing policy? So purchasing policy, for those that don't know, would be what level of authority does your audience have, right? Maybe they only have, hey, as long as it's under 10 grand, I just throw that on the corporate Amex and I'm good to go. If you're trying to sell something that's $1 million to somebody, it's like, do they need board approval for that? Do they have to have all these other people sign off on it? What exactly, who can say yes and who can pay for that? Because, the example I use here is, if a 16-year-old comes on to the Ferrari lot and starts asking to test drive a Ferrari, are you really sure that that 16-year-old is going to be able to buy the Ferrari? Right? Is the 16-year-old going to be able to pay for the Ferrari when he wrecks it on on his test drive? Right? Now, if the 16-year-old comes in and Mark Cuban is his dad, right? Or he's, that all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, I know my audience. I know the purchasing policy of that. You start to understand more of really where that challenge should be. But again, a lot of this is to understand, what are you trying to say on this meeting? And then who are you trying to talk to? And the biggest reason for both of these things is you have to capture people's attention, and you have to capture the right people's attention when you're doing things remotely. Otherwise, people could wander off. Right now, if I'm not saying anything meaningful to somebody, they've already decided to jump onto Slack, or they're playing solitaire on their phones, or they're doing something else, right? So the biggest reason to make sure that you understand all these things is that when you hit the ground running on these meetings, and you're not wasting somebody's time, because again, these are things that are going to help you capture people's attention. But as you go through the process, your sales process, you need to know, which meeting is this? Who do we need in this meeting? What information do we need to know in this meeting? So again, the more prepared you can be, the more effective you're going to be on the call. The more effective you are, the less chance that you're going to have somebody fall asleep, wander off, or actually leave the room, right? Because you can't see those things, right? So part of it is, for any of the demos and meetings, my main suggestion, and a little bit of this is, from back when we started the company and there were only 2 people at FastPath, for the Global Insurance Accelerator that are smaller organizations that may only have a couple of individuals, it's difficult. And so what I mean by hire a caddy is, right now, as I'm sitting here talking to you guys, I'm focused on presenting, but I'm not looking at the chat. I'm not looking at other things going on. I'm not taking notes. I'm not doing those things. So having somebody sitting alongside you or inside of the meeting helping you along, or if you're rambling on one specific point, they could be texting you on your phone to say, keep going, you're going too fast, you're going too slow, you totally missed the point here, we're going to run out of time. So it's kind of one of those things where until you get really proficient at holding these meetings, you want to make sure that you have somebody there to kind of help you along. And a lot of times, if you are a small organization, you can find a buddy, find your, somebody in another company, find, a parent, a sibling, somebody else in the community that will help you out, right? At the insurance accelerator, there's a lot of other companies there. Hey, do you have a half an hour that you can jump on a call and help me caddy, right? Make sure that you have somebody there to take notes, because the hard part is, if we go back to the last slide, what do you need to get to the next step? If you miss the answers to questions, if you forget to answer questions, now you're sitting there going, crap, I got to go back. I forgot to ask these 3 key things. I forgot to ask them because I got off on a tangent talking about, when the Cubs are ever going to play again. Right. So again, make sure that you have somebody there to help you put guardrails up and help you understand those things. This next point is kind of, you guys could probably tell already that I like sports. This is called Lombardi time, right? For Vince Lombardi, who was the coach of the Packers, who always said that being on time means that you're 10 minutes early, not showing up right on time. I think Michael Strahan has a famous story of when Tom Coughlin first started coaching the Giants, he fined him something like $500 or $1,000 for being 3 minutes early to a meeting, right? And so the whole thing is, last time when Mike and I did this session a couple of weeks ago, or I can't even remember how long ago that was, Mike, he and I were struggling a little bit with the handoff and the audio, and we had to do that in front of the entire group. Well, this time I made sure that I was on 10 minutes early so we could make sure that we were better coordinated. It was my fault because I wasn't on time. Right? So make sure that you're on time, and make sure that you have the technology, your computer up, make sure that you have Slack turned off, make sure that your ringer's off on the phone. Take the time. So I always tell people, it's like, hey, look, your meeting doesn't last 30 minutes. It lasts 15 on the front, 15 on the back. 15 minutes on the front to be prepared to go, 15 minutes on the back to make sure that you have all the notes, that you have everything organized. That's how long your 30-minute remote selling meeting actually lasts an hour, right? And again, know your audience, right? Know who you invited to the meeting. They have this wonderful thing now that really didn't exist back in 2004, called LinkedIn. Go figure out if you have everybody's name, go figure out what their title is. Go figure out, maybe you worked at the same organization they did. You can learn a ton about people by doing 20 seconds of research, right? Understand who your audience is, and also know who's supposed to be in the meeting, right? And one key way to do that is do introductions. Doing introductions isn't a time for you to try to figure out how to get your PowerPoint deck to work, or troubleshoot Zoom, or do any of the other stuff. Doing the introductions helps you take a roll call to understand who's in the room, to validate that you have the right people in the room, right? If you said, I have to have the CFO during this demo, and then you can make a decision. If they say, yeah, well, the CFO and the VP of IT couldn't be here today, well, then you have a decision. Do you cancel the meeting and reschedule it? Do you go ahead with the meeting and potentially waste your time and the rest of the room's time? Like, what are you going to do? Or as you go around your virtual room, maybe you hear a name you've never heard of before, and they weren't invited to the meeting, but they say, oh yeah, well, Jenny's a consultant that we brought in to help us here. Okay, well, what's Jenny's role in the decision-making process? What does Jenny do? Maybe she works for a competitor. Maybe you have no idea. So you want to make sure that you know who's in the audience. So a lot of times I see people making the mistake of thinking that, okay, they're just going to go around the room and it's going to take 20 minutes and I can fix all these other things because I'm in a hurry. No. Introductions are a time for you to validate that you have the right decision makers and the right people in that room to get what you want out of that meeting. The other thing is, straight away at the beginning of the meeting, reaffirm what you understand their challenge to be, right? Say, this is why we're here today. Confirm and ask the question, is that why we're here today? Is that what you expect to see? Now, first off, that does a couple things. One, there might be people that have never talked to you in that room that aren't really sure why they're there. Maybe the rest of your prospect has done a crummy job of explaining why are they in that room, and you're leading the meeting, right? So if somebody does a bad job on the prospect side of updating their team, you're jumping straight into a demo or something else, and you haven't set the stage at all. So one of the big things to do is affirm the business challenge, right? What are we talking about? What challenge are we trying to address today? Do you agree with that? Is that what you're hoping to see today? And then you could also, if they say, yeah, that's it, great. If they say, no, well, it's that plus it's X, Y, and Z, right? We want to see what the red paint looks like on the wall, but we want to see what the blue paint looks like as well. Oh, okay, well, maybe this opportunity got bigger for us, right? And you can start to, so make sure that you say right away what you're trying to address and what you're trying to do in the meeting. And then straight away, address the business challenge, right? Tell them this is how we solve the problem. One of the things that we've done, adjustments we've made to our business process, was we used to go through all these PowerPoint decks all the time, you know, and it was, this is when the company was started, and these are our customers, and this is all the other stuff. And it's like, and then the earth cooled, and then the dinosaurs roamed. It's like, get to the point. I came here, you know, if you are talking to leaders, especially in a time like this, people are really, as crazy as it sounds, people are super busy doing a lot of other things, and you have to capture their attention right away. So don't sit there and flip through slides talking about, you know, and I'll talk about this a couple of times. I call it showing people pictures of your kids. They don't want to see pictures of your kids, right? They want to say, this is my problem. How are you going to solve my problem? Get to the point, right? So address their business challenge straight away. One of the other things, and I have done a terrible job right now, but we're going to leave questions to the end, is stop and ask questions, right? One of the ways to do that is, I'm going to grab a drink, right? But it slows you down. It also makes sure that you say, does this make sense to everybody so far? Does this look like this is going to solve your challenge? Is this what we were hoping to do on our call today? Don't just generically say, all right, any questions? Because that doesn't really, okay, well, maybe people are nervous about asking a question. But when you're doing something remotely, you can't tell that one person is you've lost the VP of IT. And maybe the only reason you've lost the VP of IT is because they're wondering who in the room, like, what does that red button in the software do? And they've missed every other message besides that because they're looking at that red button and they're fixated on it. And so stop and ask the question, because you could waste 30 minutes going on. It also kind of helps you slow down. A lot of times when you're excited about, again, it's showing people pictures of your kids, you get very excited and have a tendency to go fast. And it's a lot of times a sales meeting. And when you're demonstrating, you can get way too excited about it. But think about it as, at that point, when you're demonstrating your software, you are teaching. You're not selling. You're teaching them how it solves their problem, how they could use the solution, as opposed to selling features and functionality. And then the last piece here is leave reasons to follow up. Right? I do this presentation for a lot of founders, a lot of software companies. Well, as a founder in a software company, you should know the answer to pretty much every single question. You probably wrote the software. You know a ton about it. If you're a salesperson and you're a good salesperson, you know a ton about everything. The thing is a lot of times the hardest thing salespeople have to do is find a reason to follow up with a customer. And so even if you know the answer to the question, right? Who had the most hits in Major League Baseball in the 1990s? I know that answer off the top of my head, right? And so if you sit there and say, if somebody asks you that question, you can say, I can just say, it's Mark Grace, right? And it's, okay, well, it was Mark Grace, but what if I say, you know what, I'm not sure, but I need to go back and check with my team. I just want to make sure before I answer that question, and I'll get back to you on that one. Right? You just kind of want to make sure that it says, and then that gives you a reason to, hey, can we jump on another call and follow up on in terms of walking through how I know who had the most hits in the 90s? It will walk you through and do that. That helps. But being able to answer every single question on a demo isn't always the best answer, unless that's your sales process and your hope is to go all the way from end to end in one meeting. Right? But if your expectation is that you're going to have multiple meetings, sometimes it's not necessarily advisable to answer every single question. You want to leave yourself some reasons to follow up. So one of the things that when we were small, let me go back here. When we were small, I did all the demos, and I did most of the selling. And so the thing is that we would have other salespeople out gathering notes and things like that. And so I was doing, in many cases, 5, 6 demos every day, and I didn't have a ton of time to do the demo prep, the 15 minutes bookended on each end to do that. So I would tell our salespeople, you need to put a prep sheet in my calendar. So I need to know who's going to be in the meeting, what their challenge is, where the company's from, their website, all these things. So I can walk into my calendar appointment 5 minutes before the meeting's going to start, look at everything, and then make sure that I can do that. But if you can't have that demo prep sheet filled out before I get to that meeting, you're not going to get paid commission, and there were negative consequences. And I don't think I ever did that, but it was a big deal. I mean, it was really, really important. And so this is kind of a template worksheet. This is when the demo is going to be. It's an online demo. Here are the people that are going to be in the meeting. Here's the name of the company. Here's a link to the company. Here's all the backgrounds and challenges. Here's the product modules they want to see. So at a glance, I could look at this and immediately say, hey, they're in Pittsburgh. So when we're doing introductions, it's like, oh, are you a Pirates fan? Oh, no, I'm not a Pirates fan. I hate baseball. Okay, well, I'm not going to use a lot of baseball examples during this today, Or yeah, oh, I love the Pirates. It's like, ooh, can I get Willie Stargell into my demo data here real quick? And then all of a sudden have kind of a link to that person. Right. So there are a lot of, and again, all these links were linked back to their LinkedIn profile. So I could go and see exactly what their roles were, but all their titles are here, everything else. So again, this will be, these demo prep sheets and meeting prep sheets are part of the deck that Mike will be able to share with you that'll be available for you. But again, this was how I could be prepared. I could work on Lombardi time, but still cut it close, because the rest of the team, Dennis did a really good job of putting all this together for us, right? And so again, you go back to that very first slide we talked about, where what do you need to know in every step of your sales process? Dennis knew that in our sales process, in order to get to a demo, these were the things that he had to put on the demo prep sheet so that we could have the demo. And then he knows what questions we need answered during the demo so we could get to a quoting to get to closing the deal. Right. So again, this was the guideline of what do I need before I can get to the next step of the process, which is a demo, is I need this. And if I don't have this, then Andy's going to look at it and go, you know what, I'm not doing the demo. Or, you know what, you're not going to get commission on this one because you didn't do your job. So again, it helps the whole team run more efficiently, and it helps the meeting run more efficiently. So a couple of tips and tricks on tools is, one of the bigger ones is pick a technology and master it. And what I mean by that is, right now there's talk of Zoom all over the place. Everybody uses Zoom. People are getting really good at it. But there are a lot of other tools that you can use. There's WebEx, there's GoToMeeting, there's some smaller freeware things. The biggest thing you need to be able to do is pick one, master it, because you better be prepared to troubleshoot it. Because if you're talking to all these remote people and they're using a product they've never used before, it's going to be and they're saying, I don't understand, I can't hear you. Okay, well, try this, try that. Maybe we need to restart the meeting. But you could chew up 30% of the time on your meeting trying to troubleshoot one person's audio issue, right? And the other thing it allows you to do is people start vacuuming and, the dog's barking, they're, trying to teach their kids pre-algebra, whatever they're trying to do in the background. How do I go out as an administrator and mute that person? First off, how do I find the troublemaker? And secondly, how do I mute that person? So again, find a technology and master it. And one of the ways we did that was we use the products internally, even when we don't have to, right? So when we were we used to use GoToMeeting, and we decided to move to Zoom. And one of the reasons, so what we did was, in all of our internal meetings, we used Zoom until we pushed it out to our prospects. So we were actually using 2 products as a company at the same time to make sure that one was going to be sufficient before we migrated. It also allowed us to build up the expertise to understand where all the troubleshooting would be. I would be very cautious of using freeware, especially if you're trying to sell B2B. A lot of companies have corporate policies that only allow them to use certain technology. So even if you go to, wow, there's this cool tool that somebody has out there. It's a startup nobody's heard of, but it's 10 times better than Zoom. It doesn't matter. They might have a policy that says, guys, we've never heard of that. It's a risk to download new software. I can't download new software. Now that I'm working remotely, it's not on our approved list. I just be really careful using smaller startup packages, especially when there are others. What I've said for a long time is this is one of the places where it's worth the investment. To find the technology, it's worth paying for it. It's worth finding something that people understand, that's ubiquitous, that they're able to troubleshoot and passes those corporate IT policies. The other thing is find a decent set of headphones, right? The idea that you're just using your laptop, and quite honestly, it might be hard right now to find a good pair of headphones, but try to find a pair of headphones that works, and test yourself, right? That this is your presentation. I say all the time that, hey, if you used to do on-site meetings, you used to have to invest in dress clothes and dry cleaning, right? You wouldn't show up to a meeting wearing, you invest in a suit, you invest in really nice clothes, you get a good haircut, you do all those types of things. Well, now headphones are like your tie. They're like a nice pair of shoes. It's like a shoe shine. Because if you have a crappy set of headphones and you sound terrible, then it's going to make the meeting awful. All everybody's going to come away with is, man, that sounded terrible, or they'll just kill the call. And so practice, right? Go out, practice with your caddy, practice with, record it, play it back. You can, do a whole lot of different things, but make sure that you get a decent set of headphones, or decide, because a lot of times you might have invested in a great set of headphones for your phone. So call in instead of using the internet connection. Or if you don't have the best internet connection and you have a good cell phone connection, like Mike said at the top, we might have to save bandwidth here. So like with the video chats, some people love video chats, other people hate video chats. We always let the prospects decide. And so it's going to be a varied thing. Some prospects love it. Other people don't want to have anything to do with it. And sometimes it makes them uncomfortable. If they're not sharing their video and you share yours, that can make people uncomfortable, right? And vice versa. If they share theirs and you're unwilling to share yours, that can make people uncomfortable. So again, with all those things, you kind of have to make sure that you've practiced it, you know it, you've got it working. But the headphones thing is a critical piece to me, because there's nothing worse than, it's like, you sound like you're in a tin can, you sound like you're 5 miles away, you sound like you've turned into Robbie the Robot, which makes me sound old, but you guys can go Google Robbie the Robot later. The other thing is, when I worked at the worldwide radio powered WVFI at Notre Dame, which was the voice of the Fighting Irish, if you want to understand what the call letters used, when you work in radio, it's not called a mute button. It's called a talk button. You only hit the button when it's your turn to talk. You don't mute it when you're not talking. And if you get that mindset, then you start to understand that you're not going to be the person that's always got the background noise, that, oh, can everybody please put themselves on mute? Good hygiene is you're always on mute unless words are going to be coming out of your mouth, right? And so again, if you can practice that and get that mindset as a team across your team, then that can help you as you get into other meetings. So like right now, and that's one of the things that I get frustrated about. I have these wonderful, iPhone headphones, but it's not real easy to find the mute button, right? And I'm sure you guys have already had 3 calls today where somebody said, sorry, I couldn't find the mute button. Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Well, like my headset, I can sit here and mute and do real quick, and there's a big red light that comes on in my headphones when they're on mute. It's a real easy button to push. So a lot of times I encourage people, as dorky as you might look with the set of headphones that I have on, they work and they're effective. It's not a fashion show, right? Being able to sound good and being able to find the mute button, to me, is more important than, well, I'm bald, so it doesn't really matter what the headphones do to my hair because I don't have any. But it's a matter of try to find something where you can be proficient in your talk button. It's not a mute button. And then the last thing is one of the things that can help you more than anything else is record your sessions and go back and, 1, have other people listen to them if you can find somebody on your team that's willing to do that, and 2, listen to yourself, right? Do you project enough? Because some people still, just like if you're on stage, some people get really nervous about talking into a microphone. They get nervous about talking. I mean, right now, unfortunately, the world is forced, and I think people are kind of dropping those barriers a little bit, but people can, become really quiet. They can become really loud. Do you talk really fast? Do you talk really slowly? Sorry, do you talk quickly and slowly? I'll be the grammar police on myself. So that practice is going to help you a ton, and it's practice, not production, right? Don't go back and review. I mean, you can, but what I mean by that is if you think that you're going to record all of your demos that you have or your meetings with prospects and then go back and listen to them, that's not practice, right? That's reviewing. That's a live case. That's testing in real life. I like to be able to do the practice, hear myself, go through that, and you'll learn a lot about that as you go through it. So those are just kind of some tools and tips about that. This is our sales process. So this is in the deck, and it'll walk through like, these are where we need this, this, and this, and it talks about how you get to each step in the sales process. So our sales process is a little more in depth, but this is content needed for CRM lead record, right? What reporting is needing, what moves it to the next stage. Okay, now we're on to stage 2, and what does stage 2 talk about, and everything else. And like I mentioned, like we have a sales methodology, and then we have a sales process, right? So our sales methodology is we do solution selling, identify the prospect's problem, and then demonstrate how we can solve that problem. We're demonstrating a solution. We're not demonstrating a product, right? So like, you won't see it. Like a lot of companies, we had a conversation with a lot of software companies about what's the difference between a product demo and a solution demo, right? A product demo is you're saying, when I hit this button, it does this. It's like a walkthrough of every single thing. So like if you've ever gotten a new car, a lot of the car dealerships want to sit you down and go, here's where the turn signal is. I think I could probably figure that out, right? My biggest problem is, how do I hook up my garage door opener to the car, and how do I hook up my phone to the Bluetooth, and everything else? I can find the headlights and I'll figure it out, but help me with those two things. Don't walk me through how the windows roll down in the car. I think I can probably figure that out. And it's the same thing. If you have limited amount of time when you're presenting your solution to somebody, you don't want to be, and this is where the analogy really hits, for showing people pictures of your children. A lot of people fail on spending an inordinate amount of time talking about things that doesn't address the prospect's problem, right? I'm glad you have kids, but I don't need to, hey, do you have kids? Yeah, we have a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old. Do you want to see 30 pictures? No, I was just more curious if you had kids or not, right? So it's the same thing. And a lot of times, if you have developers and those team members on your demos, they get very excited to show people the latest feature that they just wrote. Well, does that feature have anything to do with this prospect's problem? I know that it's real, and I used to do it myself because I'm a terrible developer and terrible programmer. So I used to get excited about anything I ever got to work, right? And thankfully, we have a lot of people that are way smarter than I am now developing our products. But it used to be, wow, look at this. Now you can export to a PDF. Who cares, dude? I just assumed that was going to happen. So if you get wrapped up into that during your sales process, and that question came up a lot after our last session, is they didn't see a product demo versus a solution demo in our sales stage. Because right here, we only try to do one demo if possible, right? We want to do that solution demo to show people this is how it solves your problem, right? And other people in their sales process, it might say, we do a product demo to show them an overview of all the features. And then when they see that, the only way they can understand how our software can solve their problem is to see an overview of all the potential things that we can do. Then we get into the solution. And so that can extend your sales process out. And everybody's sales process is going to be different. Everybody's sales methodology is different. I'm just talking from FastPath's experience and our methodology and our sales process, what we attempt and try to do as we go through what I would call like a perfect sales cycle, right? A perfect sales cycle would be that you wouldn't have to go pricing and negotiations and then go back and do another demo. And that happens. But we try to do one demo as we go through. So again, these will be available to you as you go through, if you want, from Mike. I think Mike's going to post them out there somewhere. But again, we've also talked about building that. So I'll just open it up to any questions. I'll stop my sharing now. And then it looks like we have a couple chats. Question: with all the latest article on Zoom's privacy that will cause any issues with companies allowing meeting through Zoom, um, I think that is a concern for a lot of people. I know Zoom is working quickly to address those issues. Just generically in the security world, as soon as something becomes ubiquitous, people start trying to attack it. So as quickly as they're building fixes for it, they're also finding new ways to go after that. You also have a lot of hackers with an inordinate amount of free time right now, just for fun, trying to break things. So you might see people with those concerns, and for that, you might want to have a backup plan, whether you use Microsoft Teams or GoToMeeting. If you run into that, you might want to be as familiar as you can be, or you just roll with whatever. A lot of times they'll say, your prospects will say, well, we typically use GoToMeeting instead of Zoom. Is that cool with you? And you say, yeah, as long as we can use your GoToMeeting, that's fine with us. And then you just kind of have to roll with it if it's an exception. But so far we haven't seen enough of an issue to stop using Zoom. But yes, it is a consideration. So any other questions, or Mike, did I miss anything that you wanted me to touch on?
Well, I think you've covered a lot of it. Thank you very much for doing this. We'll wait here and see if there are any questions coming through. I did post in the chat, for those of you who are in the chat, I'll be sending an email to all the attendees with a link to the video and handouts by Monday at the latest. I actually hope to get it done yet today, but I got a couple of things going on, if you will. But we'll get that right away to people. And so any other questions before we bring the call to a close? All right. Well, Andy, thank you again for doing this. And I may take you up on that offer of doing another one on sales process.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me again, Mike. Everybody stay safe and wash your hands, and hopefully we get back to our new normal here pretty soon. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks, Andy.